Hi, this is Shawn Parker, and we are here today with a candidate for the United States Senate. One of the things that we are looking to do is to move forward with our senatorial candidates as they come into the political marketplace that we talk about. We have Bernie Moreno with us. Bernie is a businessman. He is a person who has helped a number of businesses, has developed a number of businesses. He is a board member of Metro Health, so he has a deep knowledge of what's happening in healthcare. And ultimately, he is seeking a seat to replace Rob Portman in the United States Senate. This is a critical election that is coming up, and we're very excited to learn a little bit about Bernie Moreno, who he is, what he's doing, and what he hopes to help, what he is hoping to do to help Ohio move forward. So welcome, Bernie, and tell us a little bit about what your goals are.
Well, Shawn, thank you for having me. I appreciate it very, very much. I always like to come down here to Columbus. Let me just reinforce something you said. This is the most important election that we could ever have imagined, because it's not just about issues. This is about fundamentally, what kind of country are we? Are we the country that's true to our founders, or are we a country that's similar to the countries that surrounded where I'm from in Colombia, South America? Are we going to be a country like Venezuela, like Cuba, or are we going to be true to our founding principle? That's what this election is all about.
Okay. So you talk about growing up in, or actually being born in Colombia, but you grew up and were exposed. You came here as a young man, I think 6 years of age. Is that correct?
Just before my 5th birthday.
Before your 5th birthday. So what do you remember about Colombia? And in terms of juxtaposing that versus your life growing up in the United States, what was that like?
Well, what I remember is that my mom had packed up my 5 brothers, my sister, and I, and we moved here legally to the U.S., to Fort Lauderdale. That's where most South Americans go to get sorted. Although my family stayed there, I ended up obviously here in the Midwest. What I remember is really more about going back and forth to Colombia as I grew from, obviously, just before my 5th birthday to I graduated from high school when I was 18. What I remember is the chaos that was unfolding in Colombia because of all the elements that surrounded it. And then also meeting people from Cuba, from other parts of South America that have fled their countries for what we're seeing here in America, which is this push towards socialism. Because you got to remember, in 1971, South Florida was very, very different than the South Florida that's here now. When I was there, I was the only person that spoke Spanish. I had to learn English really quickly. Today, it's a almost majority Spanish-speaking area.
Yeah.
And where did all these people come from? They fled countries that are like what the left wants to take us to today. That's the ultimate irony.
Now, we know a lot of Cubans came over during the 1970s if they could get away, and they would come over on rafts, inner tubes. We don't know how many drowned along the way in order to come to America for the freedom that we offered at that time. Do you think America is as free as it was in 1971, or is that something that we're risking from the way that you opened up with your intro?
Well, I think during the Reagan administration, certainly we were. I think from that 30-year period forward, we've slid a little bit further and further left. And of course, March of 2020 happened. And when March of 2020 happened, we took a giant leap to the left. And of course, since Biden's been in office, the left has wanted to take us exponentially further left. And if we lose this election, quite frankly, next year, and they control the Senate, we won't recognize America. The country that we know just will not be the same country in 2 or 3 years.
That's pretty startling. It's an important thing to think about, and it does show the weight and the gravity that's on this election that's coming up. With a little bit more detail, you're talking right now, I think, about the social structure of America. Are we under attack only in the social structure area, or do you see it as a broader attack on our economy, on our international relations? Is it everything?
It's all of our institutions. So we know, for example, that higher ed, for example, has been taken over. Like we've almost as conservatives, we accept that happened. We shouldn't have. We should never have allowed that to happen, but it has. But we've also now seen big tech, which has an enormous influence on our lives, be completely taken over by the radical left. All levers of government have been taken over by the radical left. The institution of government itself, what Trump called the swamp, has been taken over by the left. Media has been taken over by the left. Places like the FBI, which you never would have imagined, has been taken over by the left at the top senior level. I don't think that's true in the in the lower ranks, but the senior for sure. Big corporations have been taken over by the left. You see these woke CEOs that talk about election laws in Georgia, which are completely common sense, calling them Jim Crow 2.0. So we have a lot of work to do. Nonprofits is another good example. School boards certainly is a very topical issue that we never really paid attention as conservatives who was running for school board. We certainly never did, but they infiltrated all those institutions. So we have to just reclaim those institutions one by one. That's what we have to do. It's going to be a lot of work.
It really is all encompassing, and when we take a look at it, when I read the paper, I cringe. I just think that every single thing, I agree with you, is under attack. Both from the left and the right has abdicated the position in many regards, and America is losing its sense of identity in a lot of ways. And we're hopeful that we as conservatives can bring candidates forward who will support the position of what America is supposed to be, the idea, to its highest level. In terms of you deciding to run for the United States Senate, how did you come to this decision? It's an enormous decision for someone who's a business person to step away and want to enter politics, number one. And number two, the United States Senate's a pretty high mark. So how did you come through that process, and tell us about that a little bit?
So I met Ambassador Rick Grinnell about 10 years ago, a little bit more than that, and he's somebody who's become a very close friend. He's encouraged me to run for every day since I met him.
Okay.
But I'm a relatively private person. My wife is an incredibly private person. I had 4 kids that we were raising. They're now all adult kids. So I never thought it was really a calling that I was being called to do. I care deeply about this country. I love this country. My family came here by choice. Mm-hmm. And if we lose America, we don't have any place to go. So that love of country combined with a lot of the issues that I care deeply about are national issues, things like foreign policy, tax policy, regulation. Those are the things that I care a lot about. When I saw the lockdowns begin last year, I was very vocally opposed to them, to the point where I got thrown off of Community Foundation Board. I got a petition started to get me off the Metro Health Board. Although, that what gave me strength during that time was knowing that when I went to those Metro Health Board meetings, the doctors and the nurses would say, "Hey, Bernie, thank you so much for saying what we can't say."
Okay.
Which was stark at the same time as it was encouraging. Encouraging certainly because you're on the right track. But what is this? This is not America.
Yeah.
When a person says to you, "I can't say things that are factually accurate, even though I'm a doctor or a nurse and I'm seeing these things firsthand," that's crazy. Mm-hmm. Because if people can control others' words, they can control their thoughts. And once you control others' thoughts, you control them completely, which is what you see in these socialist countries. So that was a big shocker for me. And then as Biden took over, it was maybe at the beginning a little bit of hope that says, hey, maybe he will be the moderate that he says he's going to be. But right from day one, he has absolutely been harder left than even we would have imagined Bernie Sanders to have been.
Yeah.
And then as I saw the other politicians jump into the race, I said, you know what? It's more of the same. Because one of the things that's interesting to me is that in an election, you should say, well, not only what will you do, that's certainly important, mm-hmm. but what have you done in the past? And not one of my Republican opponents, not one, Shawn, said a word about lockdowns, school closings, or mandates when it would have mattered last year. Because imagine if we all could do it over again.
Yeah.
If we could go back to March of 2020, knowing what we know now,
mm-hmm.
and somebody said 14 days to slow the spread, what would we have done? We would have been in a totally different position.
Yes.
So we needed the air cover. But if we don't have people who stand up when it's tough for them, mm-hmm. and it's only standing up when it's convenient because they want to get elected, it's more of the same. And then it occurred to me, DC's broken. It can only be fixed if we stop, as Republicans, sending the same kinds of people to DC, which is what we've been doing for years, and we've expected a different result.
Well, we're supposed to be a citizen-led government. That's what the founders basically designed for us. You're talking about 2 character attributes that you're self-identifying with, and I agree. If you did those things, one is courage. It takes a lot of courage to stand up and tell people, hey, you're wrong. The other is actually an insight. and the insight that comes from a level of experience that you have. Where do you think that insight came from? Was it from a political grounding or a business grounding standpoint?
I think a business grounding, because one of the things
Okay.
that you look at as an entrepreneur, as a job creator, is you weigh a lot of variables every day.
Yes.
You can't be binary or singular in your thinking. Hey, my health experts tell me this, therefore I have to do that. No, you don't. You don't have to follow what one group tells you. You have economics to consider, you have common sense to put into place, and you realize that something like COVID, there was no easy answer. But the idea that we would shut down the economy, remove people's freedoms and liberties for a virus that we kind of knew even back in March and April primarily affected a very specific part of the population was just very, very bad decision making. And what happened is it became a religion. And the religion and the dogma was, unless you believe that COVID is the only problem facing Earth at this moment, and we had to do everything to attack it from one dimension, you were called a lunatic. And my name was printed in the local socialist rag, Cleveland Scene magazine. My address, pictures of my house. We got death threats, and I'm okay because I have the best security system in the world. It's called the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
But my neighbors didn't sign up for that, so I hired armed security guards to patrol my neighborhood. That's not something you should have to do in America because I gave my opinion. By the way, I was right. But more importantly, let's assume I was wrong.
Okay.
I still have the right to give my opinions without fearing that somebody would come and throw eggs at my house, spray paint my driveway, potentially even harm me or my family or my neighbors. That is an insane time. And that's the kind of stuff, again, that happens in Russia, North Korea, China, Venezuela, Cuba, not America.
Absolutely. And I always say we have the freedom to fail in this country the same as we have the freedom to succeed. The people that go out and give it their all and try new ideas sometimes fail for different reasons, but sometimes that's a building block to the next idea. As it relates to COVID, one thing I saw over and over again when I talked to people, particularly on the conservative spectrum, and actually when we talk to people on the liberal spectrum, they all agree with the mathematics and the data points that were presented. And it's interesting to me how they arrive at a different conclusion than conservatives do. It's almost, I hate to use the word systemic, but there's two different wavelengths that people are rolling on out there right now. Do you think in the United States Senate there's a possibility to bring those wavelengths together, or how does that work in the future of America?
No, absolutely. In fact, one of the attributes that I think that I bring to this race is that I have a deep background in sales and in persuasion. One of my opponents called me a great salesperson, maybe insinuating that as a negative comment about me.
Okay.
I say that's the best thing, because let me ask you a question. When you're doing deals and things are hard, when do you ever say to yourself, let's bring in the lawyers to get this deal done? Never.
Last resort, yeah.
No.
Last resort, if ever, right?
Well, that's when you want the deal to collapse.
Yes.
But who do we have in D.C.? Primarily lawyers.
Yes.
So I'm proud of the fact that I'm the only candidate in the Republican side who never went to law school. I think that's great. And by the way, I'm the only candidate that went to business school, right? So that's what I bring to this party, is the idea to bring people together, use the power of persuasion to bring people to my side. That's what we need to do.
You're the only candidate in the election for Senate that's gone to business school?
Yep. Everybody else went to either liberal arts and law school, or just went. No. None of my other candidates got a business degree. All lawyers. Every single one of them has a law degree. Matt Dolan, Mike Gibbons, Josh Mandel, Jane Timken, J.D. Vance, all lawyers.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm a little surprised by that. We tend to think that most people have a business background, a business mindset. And one thing I know is a legal mindset is very, very different. It's not entrepreneurial based. It's not progressively growing in a forward direction. It's often taking a look at all the risks and simply measuring risks on a continual basis. So,
try to figure out how to minimize risk always. Whereas a business person, job creator, you don't do that. If you don't mind, let's circle back to one thing for a second. You talked about this idea of cancel culture and silencing thoughts and dissent.
Yes.
Here, one of the amazing miracles of America is that we've had innovation and diversity of thinking from the beginning of time, from 1776 on, right? This idea that this is a place where all ideas are respected in the public square. That's what brought us this incredible culture of innovation.
Yes.
If you look at places like China, it's a monolithic culture. Everybody has the same outlook on everything. See, what the left has missed is that the diversity that matters to success in a country is the diversity of opinions. What they care about is the diversity of immutable characteristics. You're white, I'm Hispanic, you're a male, I'm a male. None of those things matter because we don't control our immutable characteristics. What matters is the diversity of thought and ideas and creativity that comes to mind. And that's what the illiberal left misses. That's what makes America so special. It's why we are the most innovative country on earth, why we have more patents than anybody else on earth. China copies every one of our ideas. They never have an original idea themselves. That's where that comes from. And where the left is taking us, ironically, is a place where there is no diversity of ideas. And the minute we do that, we not only lose what America's about, but fundamentally and economically, we lose this idea of innovation.
Very good point. You could almost say that again. That I just did an op-ed in the Columbus Dispatch that was just on that, and it was a quarter page, which I was surprised that they picked me up. But I believe in that very, very much. That is who we are as a nation. It's why ideas come out of this country, and the rest of the world follows suit and tries to improve on what we make.
Yeah, I mean, think about the immigrants that come here and make a difference, right? That come here legally, of course.
Yeah.
Why didn't they do that in their home country?
Oh, I've always said that.
Right? Because America is a place where ideas come to grow and prosper. I've met people, in fact, at one event, we had people from Germany, Greece, Spain, Brazil, Argentina, me from Colombia. And to all of us, we said we could never have accomplished what we did anywhere else on earth but in America. Think about that. I'm not talking about China or some third world country, Germany, right? That he said, I could never have built a company like this in Germany, which you think, well, that's crazy, right? Because Germany, we think of this great country. It's this diversity of ideas and innovation and ability to fail. And again, it goes back to what I said. Even if I'm wrong about lockdowns, I had the right to say those things.
Yes.
Right? And that's where the left is taking us, is where I don't have the right to say those things.
Yeah, the speech policing is it's one of the most concerning things in my mind that we have going on out there, because that is extinguishing and shutting down our ideas. And America itself is an idea. The concept of a government by the people, of the people, that we had back in the 1770s was actually an idea. And it's an idea that we have to protect and carry forward. So,
it is, by the way, it's a radical idea.
A radical
idea. I mean, it's something that no one on earth ever thought would be possible. And it took 15 years for John Jay, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton spending all day, every day for 15 years to figure out how you can effectively do this. And those Federalist Papers, those 85 Federalist Papers, should be required reading for every single American student so they understand how fragile this republic is and how important it is for all of us to fight and understand how we got it and how we keep it.
You're winning points right now with our conservative base, because you are touching on philosophy and you are also touching on the expression of freedom. And that's a very, very strong place to be. How do we get votes for you from the moderate base? Is that something you think that they will readily identify?
100%.
Okay.
Because, at the end of the day, this is a country that loves America. Do you remember we just celebrated 9/11? Do you remember what it was like in October of 2001? What the patriotism felt like?
Yeah, it was thick.
It was thick. Exactly. Everywhere. I mean, I went to New York City. Think about New York City today, where my daughter lives. So I go there quite often. I'll be there Saturday. And what that was like in October of 2001. My wife and I went there. We wanted to help as best we could with anything that was going on there with the cleanup. My old boss had volunteered to have them use his helicopter for emergency supplies and things like that. So we went down there. Everybody had an American flag in their window. Everybody had a lapel pin with an American flag. People would say, hello, how are you? That was October of 2001. You go to New York today, if you have an American flag in your window, they think you're a white supremacist. I mean, how did that happen in 20 years?
Yeah, 20 years is not a long time.
Not.
But apparently it is.
It is.
It really, really is. Let's first of all, thank you. I think that's just wonderful answers, and really, really like the grounding of where you're at with that. Let's talk about Ohio. How does Ohio compete? You're running as senator to represent Ohio. Does Ohio, are we positioned properly right now to move forward into the near future or the long range future, economically, educationally, healthcare wise, et cetera?
We aren't where we need to be, for sure.
Okay.
And one of the things that I hope to bring, that I will bring to this as a United States Senator from Ohio, is I'll be the chief salesperson and cheerleader for Ohio. I've been that since I got here 16 and a half years ago.
Okay.
I went to Israel, recruited companies to come here. I talked to people about coming to live in Ohio. I myself recruited lots of people to move to Ohio. We have to get back to our roots and understand what makes Ohio a great place to live and use those attributes and expand on them. We have to look at job skilling. It isn't just college or a four-year university. That's not for everybody. Mm-hmm. This stigma that if you don't go to college, there's something wrong with you is crazy.
Yep.
By the way, college is for some, but not for all. It was never intended to be for everybody. We have to make certain that we reform our colleges and universities so that they complete and succeed through that process. So much times over the last 15 or 20 years, what I've seen is that these colleges and universities have become failure factories, indoctrination factories. I'll give you an example. When I got to Cleveland 15 and a half years ago, I was asked to help Cuyahoga Community College called Tri-C. And I didn't have 2 cents to give to anybody. My change drawer was my working capital. But they thought I was a multimillionaire because I just bought a dealership. And I said, you're right. I owe multiple millions of dollars. Okay.
Right.
But I have no money to spare. But 2 or 3 years later, we got some level of success. And I went back to Tri-C. The graduation rate for black students was 1%.
What?
1 out of 100 kids that were black that entered Tri-C graduated from Tri-C.
Why was that?
Because they were failure factories.
Okay.
They were paid on how many kids they could get into the system, but didn't care anything what happened to them while they were there or help them succeed. Hispanic kids, 3%. So I said, well, how can I give you money to fail that many children?
Yeah, it's that's worse than abysmal.
No, it's almost, I actually say if you were a white supremacist, you would do better because you wouldn't get caught. Yeah. Right? But 1%, think about how crazy that is. On top of that, look how much money you're spending. Federal money, their own money, debt, crazy. Make a long story short, I traveled the country with my wife, Bridget. We looked at best practices. Mm-hmm. We brought them a solution because I'm not somebody who just likes to identify problems. I like to fix problems. I put my personal money behind it, $500,000, and another $300,000 later, so total almost $1 million. And we've graduated almost 400 kids through our program at an 83% graduation rate. They then took that model and put it university-wide, and they're now up to over 27% graduation rate, which, by the way, not good enough.
Yeah.
But dramatically better. And it was simple, easy things. So when I hear the left talking about right now free college, free community college, they would destroy community colleges by making them free because they'd have zero accountability to anybody. What they need to do is they need to be accountable for results, just like you do, right?
Absolutely.
In your business, are you accountable for intake or output?
Everything.
Right? Output, right? You
But
can
output,
have
yeah.
100
Results.
listings, but you never sell a house or a commercial
Sure.
building. Well, you're not going to be in business very long. So colleges and universities need to be accountable for placing these kids into high-performing, high-paying jobs. And also being honest with kids that say, this may not be for you, but we have a path for you. They also are incredibly bureaucratic and backwards thinking. I'll give you an example. At Tri-C, if a kid enrolled there because they didn't want to go to CSU, Cleveland State University, because they wanted to pay lower tuition, let's say they took 20 or 30 credits there, and then said, you know what, this college is for me. I want to go to the 4-year school now. When I got there 15 years ago, not one single credit would transfer from Tri-C to CSU. The kid would have to start all over again.
Wow.
Think about the crime to the kid, to the people paying, which is you and I,
Sure.
taxpayers.
Ultimately.
So when I left there, now we dual enroll the kids. You go to Tri-C, you're automatically enrolled at CSU. 100% of your credits transfer for the most part, and it's a seamless transaction. That was done because there's a will and a willingness to solve a problem. See, because I believe one of the things we got to stop doing is putting people in charge who don't know how to fix things. They just know how to talk about things or write about things, but they don't know how to actually do it. That's the problem in D.C. Talkers, talkers, talkers. You look at the current crop of people we send to D.C., ask yourself, how many of them have actually accomplished anything in their life. Have solved a problem. They a lot talk about problems. They write about problems. They never solve them.
You're high energy. You'll go in to D.C. Do you think that you will upset the apple cart pretty quick? Or
I hope so.
Do you think? Oh, you hope so? Okay.
I said I'm going to reach across the aisle and smack him across the head. That's what I want to do. That's what we need to do. We need to have people down there that say, hey, listen, we're going to call it like it is. So much of it, we think it's over sophisticated, right? Like, oh, let's, we have to be careful and there's a process. No, there's not. Listen, at the end of the day, nobody likes to pay taxes. Okay. But makes it worse is that you see the way the government treats our tax dollars, right? And so you have to call things like what they are, and you have to just get stuff done. Listen, we're there to work for the people. I'm being hired by the people of Ohio to represent them in Washington, D.C. That's where my paycheck is coming from the people of Ohio, from their hard-earned dollars. I better damn well go down there and do something for them that improves their lives. If not, don't take the job. I've heard politicians say, hey, you can't get anything done in D.C. Well, then why did you take the job?
Yeah.
Right? You have a salesperson that comes here and says, I can't sell anything. Well, then don't take the job.
Yeah. Worst thing I could do is give you a job because we're going to disappoint each other.
Exactly.
And that's a hard relationship.
So we have to look at what people have done in the past. I hear a lot of people in this race talk about they care a lot about these issues. Well, that's great. But have you done anything about these issues? I'll give you another one, freedom of speech on campus, which is the predecessor to really the CRT issue that we have today.
Okay.
This idea that in a college campus, like we just talked about, I can have crazy ideas. I can say things to the left that's crazy. I can say things to the right that are crazy, because more speech is what it's all about. That's what we grow intellectually.
Yes.
But colleges and universities were shutting down conservative speech, not even allowing a conservative speaker to come in and speak. I said this when I was chair of the board of CSU. I said, we are going to tackle this issue. And we did. And we got the highest rating possible by an institute called FIRE, which rates free speech on campus. Only one in Ohio. There's another person in this race who is also the chair of university board, and they got one of the lowest ratings, and she never did anything about it then. So let me ask you a question. How is it that now you're going to ask the voters of Ohio to send you to D.C. to defend free speech, to defend the First Amendment, to fight back against critical race theory, but when you were in a position to do it, you didn't? To me, that's completely disqualifying.
Yeah, if you have an opportunity and you fail, then you're a failure.
Well, you didn't do anything about it. What you were doing is you wanted the job.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing we got to do is we got to get away from politicians who want the job. They want the title. They want the reserved parking spot at the country club. They want the badge that they wear on their lapel pin. Listen, if that's why you want the job, probably a good sign you shouldn't get that job.
Yeah. It's not the old boy network of 1950. We have big problems to fix in America today.
Right, and we need serious people with a background that knows how to fix these things because, again, it goes back to what I said. If we send the same kind of people there, we're going to get the exact same results. And people are fed up with it, I think, intuitively. When I travel Ohio, people give me that same idea, whether we call them hard right, moderate right, center. They all basically feel the same way, which is we're just disgusted. We're pissed and we're disgusted because we send these people down there and they disappoint us over and over again. We want just people to get things done. And again, I think our founders understood that, which is why, like you said at the beginning, this has got to be a citizen-led government. I hope that not only do I get to D.C., but I hope I inspire lots of other people who never in a million years would have said, I'm not going to go through that process. They'll say this about me or they'll make this up about me. And so I'm not going to put my family through that. And that's the built-in disincentive for good people to do it. I'd say I hope I inspire them to say, you know what, this country means too much to me. And you know what, our people who got us our freedom today, they took bullets for this country. They bled for this country. They died for this country. A mean tweet, who cares?
Yeah, they lost fortunes. Let's talk about Ohio a little bit more. Ohio has a complex economy. The number one economy or industry in Ohio is agriculture. Number two is industry. We're a Rust Belt state. We were put on our knees for many years. We do have some businesses here that do very, very well. We have a amazing location in the world to our north. We have a lake that is very cheap to produce transportation. We have a river system to the south of us. Iron ore close by. We have energy, abundant energy in this state, and not far off from us. We have rail lines. We are the center of transportation. as it relates to the world. Franklin County, for example, #1 warehouse market in the real estate business. What do we do to get Ohioans working harder, and what do we do to make Ohio more prosperous, aka back to where we were in the 1970s with our industry and our agriculture all working together to put us at the forefront?
Well, you missed one thing, which is we have great people here. We have great people, and we have great cities, right?
Yep.
I mean, Bridget and I moved here 16 and a half years ago. We could have moved back to Boston, moved back to Florida, gone anywhere we wanted to. We stayed here because it's a great place to raise a family, great people, and again, great cities and towns. I'd say to you, if you look back in the 50s, our average income in Ohio was about 6 or 7% higher than the national average, and today it's about 20% below. Mm-hmm. So what's happened is that we gutted our towns and cities. We took our middle class and gave it to China. We built the Chinese economy at the price of the Ohio economy. So what do we have to do? We have to reverse course on that. We have to disentangle ourselves from China. We have to bring back critical industries to the U.S., steel, semiconductor chips, pharmaceuticals, personal protective equipment, because this won't be the last virus, and of course be energy independent. When we do that, not if we do that, when we do that, and by the way, that should be bipartisan. Nobody should disagree with that. And one of the things I want to do is provide leadership to the Ohio caucus. So when we go down to Ohio, we're there as one united group. 15 Congress people, 2 senators, we're all united around what do we do for Ohio. And I think the answer is when we bring all these industries back to the U.S., disproportionately Ohio will work. It will work for Ohio because we know how to make stuff. And we can also make good trade deals with countries that say, hey, we'll buy your industrial goods, but you have to buy an equal number of industrial goods back from us. And that could be agriculture, that can be energy, natural gas, 5th largest natural gas reserve in the world. That's an enormous amount of prosperity for Ohio. Mm-hmm. And again, with remote work and remote living, you don't have to be in D.C. and New York and San Francisco and L.A. You can be in Ohio. You can be in a place like Newark. You can be in a place like Coshocton. That's a beautiful, beautiful place to live. Mm-hmm. But because of high-speed internet and virtual meetings, you can be there. And we just need to add some better air service in our major cities. And we have to bring these in. We have to make it easy for companies to come back here. And I think not only do we have to work together as a congressional delegation, but also with a state government and local governments. And that's one of the things that senators really don't do. They don't get their hands dirty, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. Listen, if I'm trying to bring a company to come here and they're having a problem with a permit, I want to call that mayor and say, let's go. Let's get this thing done.
Yeah.
And senators don't do that. That's beneath them. Nothing's beneath me. You look at how I ran my company. I had to pick up clients at the airport and put their license plate frames on. That's what I did. So that's what I think that they just don't use the power of the office that way. And I think it's important to do that.
That's one thing that strikes me about you is we first met at a club meeting in Dublin, and you were one of the only people ever to stick around afterwards and help put things away. A lot of people would give a speech, off they go. And I had so many comments coming up about the fact that you actually have a work ethic that's very, very genuine, very, very unique. Where does that come from? How did you find that? Is that natural, or did someone help build that in you?
Yeah, I mean, if you spent 5 minutes with my mother, you would say, "Okay, I get it."
Okay.
You understand it. She raised. We left Colombia under different circumstances than most people understand. My family is actually very wealthy in South America.
Okay.
My dad had 11 people in his family. My dad was the only one who worked. We had 7 kids in my family. My mom did not want us to grow up like that, so she purposely took us from wealth to middle class status or less, because she wanted us to understand what it was like to have to work to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve in life. Nothing was ever given to us when we were a kid. If we wanted something, you got to go work for it. It was never anything that was ever granted to you and have an allowance, or you could get this. Listen, you want to go spend $20 there, you go make $20. I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you're 10, 12, 14, 16. I remember when I was 12 years old, think about this, Shawn. I was 12 years old. I wanted to spend some money, so the only job I could get was delivering newspapers.
Okay.
A guy showed up at my house at midnight, picked me up in a van.
This sounds like a bad story coming out of here.
I then drove to Galtoshima, which is where the condos were, and dropped off newspapers for 3 hours. Got back home at 3 o'clock.
Park and A1A.
Oakland Park and A1A. You got it.
Yeah, I know
so I
that.
drove there. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd be back home. Now, what for $20 a week? Now, as an adult and a father of 4 kids, I'd say to my mom, what kind of person sends their 12-year-old with a strange person at midnight? But the point was that work ethic, but that's what built America.
Yeah.
That's what America exceptionalism is all about. The idea that you are only bound by your dreams and your ambition. Mm-hmm. And if we lose that, again, what kind of country are we? We're going to be a country that goes down the socialist Marxist path, because that's what they want. They want everybody to end up the same.
So with that, I want to go back to middle class and developing people, because we talked about your exposure in the education marketplace and helping people to move forward. One of my concerns is I do see a huge amount of people, and most of them don't vote Republican or they don't vote conservative, two different things in a sense, because they are very comfortable in living at a very low lifestyle. They complain and they like to watch the Hollywood movie stars and say, wow, that's really cool. That guy's flying on a G6 jet. How do we rebuild those values? You're talking about values. How do we get those values back to young people and families so that they actually enter into the employment market or build businesses and become a part of the American fabric?
Well, our social safety net was intended to be exactly that, which is a safety net. Instead, what we've made it is a couch. Mm-hmm. And what we have to do is we have to get people off of a culture of dependency. If you know anybody who's had addiction issues, addiction to government is no different than addiction to any kind of drug or medication. You have to get them off of that. The reality is, at some point, you have to let people fly on their own. And you have to understand and be willing to understand that some people will fail. But it's that lack of willingness to say, hey, you have to come off of this dependency is really important. And what we've done over the last 18 months is the exact opposite. We made people comfortable and more comfortable by not working. We have one of every 3 adults that are able to work are currently not working. It's why you can't go to a restaurant and get in, why Paneras are closed at noon, why you can't get on an airplane, why literally everything is backed up, because people are not working. As a government policy, you have to say, listen, we will take care of those who've given a shot at working and just for whatever reason can't. But somebody who's able-bodied, I'm sorry, they're not entitled to 1 cent of government support. It's anti-American. It's just philosophically wrong, and you're robbing those people of their soul. It's not the right thing to do. It sounds harsh, but in reality, you're helping that person because you're giving them the self-esteem. I've never taken a cent from the government up until the PPP loan for my Infiniti dealership in Coral Gables, and they killed me to take that money. But They closed my dealership, so I took that money. Other than that, not 1 cent. When I built $65 million worth of buildings in Ohio, never took 1 cent. When I put my tech company in Cleveland, never took 1 cent. I would rather clean toilets than take unemployment money from the government, because at least I have my dignity, and I can look myself in the eye and say, I am the reason I am in this position. And right now, there's no excuse for anybody to be out there working. McDonald's will pay you a hiring bonus. It's wrong. And what happens is you got to understand, when people are putting you in that position, they're doing that so that they get power. And once they rob you of your self-esteem, control your thoughts, regulate your speech, they completely own you. And that's what you see in Venezuela or Cuba. Interestingly, and I think I said this at the Dublin GOP Club, which I love, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Is that in downtown Columbus last summer, one of the most sad things I've ever seen in America was college students who've wanted for nothing, really, their whole lives.
Yeah.
Are burning and defacing the American flag and everything America stands for. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you have Cubans that never even have known freedom. They've never known liberty. They've never known anything but oppression and poverty at the hands of their government, are holding American flags, risking their lives to do that. And think about that contrast. Yeah. One of the things I think would be very helpful is to take these students, these people that are protesting that say America's systematically racist, it's broken, just take them to Cuba, which I've been to, just 3 days. Mm-hmm. 3 days in Cuba, they would kiss the ground of America. They would raise that flag and salute it every single day.
Yeah.
They would admonish anyone who knelt for the national anthem because they have no idea what it is that they're talking about, what it is that they're defacing. It's very, very sad to me as somebody whose family came here and understands what is at stake in America. And I think that's a message that all people in Ohio need to understand. I think for the most part, Shawn, honestly, it's probably 80%, 85% that do. It's just that the 15 to 20% are so darn loud and are all over social media. So you think maybe that's 50-50. It's not. We are the majority. It's just that we've been quiet and we're just generally polite people. We don't go around protesting. We have things to do. We have jobs that don't allow us to spend half a day and an afternoon out there yelling about stuff we don't know about.
So the college kids, because I did see the college kids, and I actually knew some of the college kids, and they were kids who didn't grow up necessarily in the greatest of circumstances, but they have the avenues available to them if they choose to take them. Some of them have had great privilege in their lives through different things. A couple of the leaders I know very well, and they are kids that were full scholarship kids. And they were, I'm going to say, given a lot of information in college about why their lives were so bad, which goes into a narrative of people being driven in a direction. Brainwashing is probably the most extreme word that we would use. What do we do? We talked a little bit about institutions that were kind of leading into that situation, silencing free speech in colleges. There's a whole group of people that are coming up with this idea of disenfranchisement, with the idea of racism, systemic racism. Can this be healed in America? Is this something that you as a senator, the United States Senate, can actually have a positive role in? Or do we simply have to deal with it at the local level?
So I'd say all of the above.
Okay.
But I would say to you, the ultimate privilege is American privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they don't realize they have.
Okay.
They have this privilege that nobody else on earth has. They get to be Americans. Think about how silly it is to say that this country is systematically racist. At the same time, that two things happen. People will risk their lives and give every penny they have on earth to come into this country illegally.
Yeah.
Right? They literally risk their lives. You saw the container truck the other day, 130 people in the back of a cargo truck coming up 15 hours from Central America.
And paying a lot of money.
Their life savings. Every cent.
Yeah, every cent.
Every cent they've ever had. So they're coming to a country that's systemically racist. How silly a conversation that is. Secondly, blacks in the world are most prosperous in America. Hispanics in the world are most prosperous in America. Women are most prosperous in the world in America. Gays and lesbians are more free anywhere else on earth in America. So yet we have this group of people, this 10, 15, 20%, that wants to change that narrative and convince us that it's not true. They want to convince us that up is down, left is right. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. And what happens in universities is that we, as parents, have not done a good enough job of telling our kids that at home, explaining to them, being the counterweight to these radical professors that have been allowed to run free and indoctrinate our kids. And what's happened is it's a perverse incentive, because if you're a student that has any kind of conservative ideology, you get punished. And if you have a liberal or socialist bent, you get rewarded. Mm-hmm. So Pavlov dog, right? You write a paper, and I saw my youngest son do this at the University of Michigan.
I saw my son do it.
Writing a paper, he said, "Dad, look at this crazy stuff I just wrote. Solid A+."
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he doesn't believe it, but that's crazy. So what can we do, right? Again, we identify problems. We have to talk about solving them. First, the federal government has enormous sway over these universities in the form of government assistance for the students to go there. Mm-hmm. So you say to universities, listen, you either respect free speech on campus, you have diversity of ideas in your faculty, or kids won't be Pell eligible to go to your school. Secondly, to the most elite universities in the United States, very simple. You're no longer tax-free. You're no longer going to get a free ride on federal government. Harvard, your $40 billion endowment, which grows tax-free, sorry, you're going to pay taxes like everybody else. And you know what you're also going to do? You're going to pay property taxes to your local municipality. Because in Harvard, every time they buy property in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the property taxes of that middle-class family goes up because they have to pay for the services of the whole city, which is insane. So those are things that you can do. And then at the local level, it's happening, Shawn. That's what makes me so hopeful. It's happening. We're seeing people at 4 or 5 times what happened before running for school boards. I was up in Olentangy, 2 amazing moms. They're going to win.
Yeah.
And they're going to make some serious changes to the 6th largest school district in Ohio. They're not going to teach kids in 2nd grade that maybe they're not a boy or maybe they're not a girl or all these crazy. Why would you talk about that in 2nd grade? Come on. I don't know to hear that in college, let alone in 2nd grade. So those, and by the way, you know what? Instead of teaching that you're oppressed or you're a victim, all through K through 12 and college, shouldn't we be teaching science and math and critical thinking and history?
Classical education.
Classical education, which, by the way, is what they're doing in China.
Yeah.
So you can imagine if you're a leader in China and you see our military doing what it's doing, our schools doing what they're doing, you got to be thinking, we don't have to ever wage war against America. They're destroying themselves. And we have to just wake up, and I think we have. And I think if we continue to fight hard like we're doing now, get our country back, and then continue to keep fighting is how we keep our country. And I think both things are going to happen.
So, biggest threats to America. You mentioned China. Everybody talks about China being a super threat. China has a global presence. China does not have a blue water capable navy, so they cannot leave the first island chain to go out and sail into the world. America has the largest air force in the world with the United States Air Force. The 2nd largest air force in the world is the United States Navy. Should we be afraid of China?
Absolutely. We're China. And right now, honestly, I think to a large extent they're winning because they're winning the cyber war, which we're not paying attention to. We don't play rough like they do. And we have incredible offensive cyber weapons. We don't use them. We only use defensive weapons.
Okay.
I think one of the things that if we had only seen 4 more years of Donald Trump, I think we would have seen an actual victory there against China, where we say, listen, you can attack us on cyber, sure. And then do what I used to tell my kids, 10 times rule. Somebody attacks you, you attack them back 10 times harder. And China needs to learn that lesson. And we just have not done that. We should do the same thing with Russia. Again, we're not going to go on the offense, but we're also not going to stand by and let them do that to us. I think, secondly, they've corrupted a lot of levels of our federal and state governments.
Okay.
Through
the Chinese.
The Chinese have through spies.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you look at how much government officials are embedded, literally and figuratively, with Chinese spies, it's a disgrace. I think you look at how many of our government officials rely on money from China, where their personal net worth is tied up with that. Listen, that's the Hunter Biden laptop story, isn't it? This idea that they bought off the son of a sitting vice president, and nobody blinked, and now he's a president. And again, nobody's blinked. The idea that they're owned. We have Confucius Institutes in our universities that are basically spy operations. We need to immediately get rid of those. That should have happened it should never have happened in the first place, let alone continue to happen. We shouldn't allow the Chinese to do things that we don't have back. So, for example, if a Chinese company wants to do business in the U.S., no problem. If an American company wants to do business in China, there has to be this joint venture relationship where they can steal our intellectual property. And everybody says, well, that seems fair. That's insane. You would never do that deal, right? So anything that's good for them has got to be good for us, and we have to stand up to them and just call it what it is. Ultimately, they want to have a different view of the world than we do. They're a strategic adversary, not a competitor. Competitor is Germany. Germany and England and France, Australia, they're competitors. China is a strategic adversary. They view that Declaration of Independence as an offense to them. Because, see, government is who gives you your rights, not God. There's no such thing as God in China. We have to treat that the way it is. We have to disentangle ourselves from that relationship. We have to make what we can make here, and we have to find friendlier countries. Honestly, for obvious reasons, I think South America is a great place to look for the things that we can't make here because we can't make it work. We need to look at Central and South America, which solves 2 problems, the immigration issue and having a much better partner in the world where we control the Western Hemisphere than China.
Okay, good thought. I want to touch on something else you just mentioned in terms of the Chinese mindset of being dependent on government. One of the big themes that we believe happens here in the United States, at least as conservatives, is that we believe in the individual rights, that God actually gives people the right to choose, the right to life, and the right to property. On the left, they seem to think that government gives you the right to life, the right to choose, and the right to property. Is that something, and this will go into a number of issues with you in the United States Senate, do you follow along that separation? And that will come down to your ratifying Supreme Court justices, your ability to ratify treaties, your ability to make the highest level decisions on where we go. Is there any place where those two blend across one another in your mind?
No, I think there's a binary choice there. I think we should all as Americans believe in the smallest, least intrusive government possible as our mantra. Okay. I was in China in 2008, and I remember talking to Bridget when I flight back and saying, could you imagine living in a country that told you how many children you're allowed to have? Just that, right? How odd that would be.
Did you see the Democratic thing this week that came out where someone was going to introduce 3 children, then sterilization?
Well, you see my point.
I couldn't believe that was real.
Well, but that's my point. So in 2008, I'm leaving China, saying I can't fathom, because it's hard for us, right, to think of something that's not our reality. I couldn't fathom 13 years ago that there would be a country on the planet in which humans were told this is how many children you can have. Mm-hmm. Today, look what's happening. They're introducing bills that sound a lot like China, and yet we're not as outraged by it as we should be. That's 13 years from I can't even imagine it to, hey, by the way, maybe in our own country. Mm-hmm. That's why when I say to you, Shawn, this is the fight of our lifetime. This is the storming of the beaches of Normandy of our time. We don't have to do it through bullets. We have to do it through ideology, the power of our words, the power of our ballot, the power of our vote, the power of our organizing, doing the Dublin GOP Club. You have other things to do.
Yeah,
you have plenty of other things to do, but you do it.
Yep.
And that's all of us. We have to do this together. Too many times for the last 30 years since Reagan, we've convinced ourselves that somebody else would heal America, or maybe it would heal itself. And I didn't have to do it. But guess what? It's on every single American to join this fight. And again, we will win, but we need to understand it's going to be very, very difficult. And what we've seen over the last 8-9 months from the left is that they're vicious. They understand that the battle's coming to them, which is why they're marshaling all the institutions that I mentioned earlier in opposition. Think about what happened to John Husted just a few months ago, when he said, hey, it looks like the virus did come from Wuhan. Mm-hmm. And he made Cleveland news that said, oh, this is a racist, anti-Asian, blah, blah. Did they say that about the Spanish flu?
No.
I didn't find that offensive.
Or the Hong Kong flu?
or the flu, or the UK variant,
flu,
the South African variant, right? But look at because they're marshaling all the resources, and it's no different in middle school. Mm-hmm. So any parent out there that's listening to this that has a middle school child, this is the battle. You have the mean girls, the 2 or 3 or 4 horribly mean girls that are controlling the school. Well, we have to take back the school from the mean girls and know that it's 4 to 200, and we are the majority, and we will silence them. It's the only way we do it, but we have to be tough. We can't be bullied. We can't give in. We have to believe in what we are saying, and we have to be willing to take incoming shots. That's why I go back to this idea of not speaking out against lockdowns. Listen, if you're on Fox News every night, and last year you didn't say a damn word about lockdowns or school closings, I'm sorry, you have no credibility with me that you're going to be somebody who goes down to D.C. and fights, because you didn't do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like you didn't do it 20 years ago. You didn't do it 12 months ago, 9 months ago. And now all of a sudden, you want a job from the people of Ohio, so you're going to do what's popular today. To me, that's disqualifying. And I hope your listeners and yourself and the members of the club that you're head of, that you really interrogate these candidates, because it's not only important to keep the seat, It's important to send somebody down there who's actually going to meet your expectations. We've been disappointed enough. We've had it with people that we send down there and disappoint us constantly. Well, why did that happen? Because we didn't do the homework up front to know who is what and what have they done in their past. And I hope and I pray and I'm convinced that in this election that will be different.
Well, it's this election. One thing I tell people is that in one light, Donald Trump could have been the best thing that happened to America. In another light, he also lulled the conservatives to sleep because they felt that their champion was there doing the work for them and they no longer had to participate. And we had to come out and start bringing people back to life, so to speak. The other side is we felt, in terms of what we're doing, we're now at 27 clubs. We're talking with Mansfield about getting a club up in Mansfield. That local initiative to bring people back to life is very, very fundamental. So with people on the left, what Bernie, and we're with Bernie Moreno, candidate for United States Senate from the state of Ohio. We're a proud person who is a good fighter. And what do you feel is the driving force on the left? Why do they fight the way they do? What is the end game? What are they after? And why are they doing it at the level that seems to defy everything against a free market and everything against the American ideal that's out there? What's up?
They're true believers. They are true believers.
Believers of what?
They believe in this idea of equality of outcome.
Okay.
They believe in the socialist ideals. They look at countries like Venezuela, Cuba, China, Russia, North Korea.
All failed countries.
But they just say it maybe wasn't done properly. See, if they have one more chance, they can do it the right way. They firmly and fervently believe that. It's their religion.
Okay.
It would be like asking a Christian, how is it that you're so willing to put your faith in God to guide you? Well, we understand that. It makes
Sure.
sense to us.
First thing is there is a God.
Right, there is a God. And listen, I went into Mexico when I traveled to the border because and everybody said, well, you could get killed, kidnapped. And I said, I know God isn't ready for me yet.
Okay.
And that's what gave me that ability to go there without fear. That makes sense to me. Somebody who doesn't believe in God will hear what I said, and it will make no sense to them. They'll think I'm a crazy person. So to the left, the things that we think are crazy, because we know socialism's failed. We know it's caused more injury, more death, and more harm than any other ideology ever introduced on the planet. But they don't believe that. So it's their fervency and their fervor for this ideal that is what drives them. I think, unfortunately, on the conservative side, we haven't been as active. In fact, one of the things I would challenge you on, Shawn, is don't let the Dublin GOP club ever end after this election. It's got to get stronger post-22.
Agreed.
And stronger post-24. And guess what? When we do control the levers of power, and we will, even stronger. And then what you got to be doing is get me back to your club. Insist that I come back and see you and hold me accountable and say, hey, Bernie, you've been in D.C. for 9 months. These are the things that you said you were going to do. You haven't done them. We expect you to get these things done. That accountability is critical.
Yes.
It's very, very important. We can, once we've assembled this army, we have to keep it and feed it and keep it going for a long time. That's what we didn't do with Reagan. Think about what Ronald Reagan accomplished from 1980 to 1989. It was a miracle.
It was.
Right? I mean, you remember, I mean, I was a kid, what 79 felt like?
Yeah.
It feels a lot like 2021.
You were almost you weren't ashamed to be an American because we had my dad was a World War II vet, and we had a deep sense of pride, but we were bewildered. We were humiliated as a country, and we were being told it was okay to be humiliated because we had sins that we needed to grow up and grow around. And the old guard sat there and said, this is not right, this is wrong, but we trusted our leadership to carry us forward. And frankly, we didn't have any leadership that stepped forward until Reagan came forward. And people looked at Reagan. He wasn't necessarily the first choice of the conservatives. Barry Goldwater was. Reagan came forward, and when Reagan stepped on the stage, we started to hear what he was saying. And that's one of the things with candidates that come from other industries that aren't professional lifelong candidates. We have to find a way to hear them. And that's one of the goals that we're doing, is to make sure that all candidates have a place to come and be heard. and the good ones will actually identify themselves. You're one of the good ones, by the way, I think. The key that we moved on to after Reagan, we went to the Clinton years. And all of a sudden, we're actually back there as a country saying, why do we exist the way that we are? The economy actually was fabulous, and people were all doing well. So a lot of people looked the other way.
Yep.
But the true Americans said, something's not right here. We are starting to lose ground. And then we went to, and I'm talking about Democratic candidate or presidencies right now. Then we came to Obama, when all of a sudden it was no longer right for America to exist in the ideal structure. When we had the Arab Spring, it was an apology to the rest of the world. Obama apologized for things that we did. Our sailors sat on boats with their heads on their hands in Iran. And I looked at that and I said, this is not who we are. Because one thing I know time and time again where I've traveled the world is when parents put their kids in bed, and I say this about the Europeans I know, they say, it's okay, sleep well, sleep safely. Germans in particular, the Americans are watching over us. Mm-hmm. And that is why I sat and I said, I need to put this club to get it to the next level. We need to build more clubs. We need to start a movement of the people. I have no interest in public office. I have an interest in making sure that we have the best people in public office. And I do think you are one of the people that we really need to be taking a look at on this scene for United States Senator representing Ohio. With that, we're starting to run up on time here a little bit more. What else have we not asked you that we need to know about Bernie Moreno and why Bernie Moreno is the person that should be taking Rob Portman's seat?
Yeah, what I would ask your listeners to consider is take a look at what I've done in my past when I wasn't running for office, when I didn't need people's support. What did I do? One example, when Buick closed the factory in Michigan to open it in China, of course, of all places, and then shipped that car from China to the U.S. called the Envision. Super hot selling car. I told General Motors I would not sell that car, not to ship me any. They threatened to take my franchise away. They said I'd never be a GM dealer in any other brand as a result of doing that. Cost me millions of dollars. But at the end of the day, you either believe what you believe or you don't. I didn't do that because I was going to run for office 7 years later. Yep. I did because that was the right thing to do. The lockdowns, right? I stood up, risked my reputation to stand up and have that voice when it wasn't easy for me to do that, right? So those are when I built my tech company, I could have built it elsewhere for a lot less money, a lot easier, a lot less friction. It would have been easier to hire people, find funds, but I built it in Cleveland because I believe in Ohio. I've brought companies here. I never changed my residency to Florida, which would have saved me a lot of money, right? Yeah. But I stayed in Ohio. So you got to look at the person's track record, the freedom of speech conversation we talked about at CSU, the scholarship program I taught at Tri-C. Interview the other candidates the same way. Don't just say, I'm going to be tech's worst nightmare, or I'm going to stand up for free speech, or I'm going to go up against these world corporations. Great. That's fantastic that you're going to do that. Give me one example of when you've done that in the past. The world corporations, well, why are you taking their money? Why are you taking their corporate PAC money if you're going to stand up to them? That seems incongruous, right? Doesn't make any sense. So I think those are the tough questions. I think sometimes as Ohioans, as Midwesterners, we tend to be very, very polite people.
Yes,
we don't want to ask tough questions, right? But this is not the time for us to be timid. This is a time for us to talk to all these candidates and ask them those hard questions. Every single one of us. And we have to get involved in whatever way is possible. And believe me, there's always a little bit more you can do. You're doing the Dublin GOP Club, which is amazing. But to your other listeners, what are they doing? Yeah. Are they running for school board? Are they knocking on doors for school board members? Are they being poll watchers? Right? Are they out there advocating for the right candidates? Are they spreading the word? Are they insisting that their friends who may be conservatives but are apathetic registering to go vote? Because you know who does that? The left is doing that.
Yeah.
And even though they're a small minority, they're kicking our butts because we have not gotten off ours. And if you love this country, if you care for this country, if you care for the future of this country, get involved. It doesn't matter how small. Everybody needs to be part of this effort.
Agreed. Okay. Well, Bernie Moreno, thank you for giving us this time. We hope to hear a lot more from you. We're very, very happy that you are a true conservative and that you're willing to do everything that you're doing to make America safe, to make Ohio safe, and to carry us into the future. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Shawn. Thank you for having me. You can follow me on social media at Twitter at Bernie Moreno, Moreno. My website is berniemoreno.com, Moreno.com. On Facebook, follow the page there as well, Bernie Moreno, and also on Instagram at Bernie Moreno1. And by the way, for those of you who want to know, on TikTok at Bernie Moreno. There you maybe see a little bit different social media than everywhere else. And also I'm on LinkedIn, Bernie Moreno there. So berniemoreno.com. You have all the issues that maybe we didn't get to today. Please take a look at that website.
Hey, thanks for giving us your time to listen. You've been listening to Fill in the Blank with Shawn Parker, where we talk about the issues of politics and the geopolitical marketplace as well as economics. If you like our channel, please subscribe to us at Fill in the Blank on YouTube. And be sure to listen every week as we come back to you with some of the most thought-provoking people of the day. And learning is always the key to what we're trying to do.